Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar series, Generative Entrepreneur, where business leaders and technical innovators come together to accelerate AI applications to market and scale them to production. My name is Puneet Jeyasingh, and I'm a Cloud and AI Partner Solution Architect in the Enterprise Partner Solutions organization at Microsoft. I work closely with software development companies and system integrators to drive impactful AI outcomes. In today's session, we will be diving into the why, what, and how of building and scaling an AI center of excellence, and most importantly, making it real. So let's jump in. Jimmy, we'd love to share a little bit about yourself and about Quisitive and what kind of work you are doing in the AI space.
No, thank you so much for having us today. So my name is Jimmy Ledbetter. I'm the VP of AI Strategy and Solutions here at Quisitive. So Quisitive is a Microsoft Azure pure play partner. So we sit on top of really all of the pillars from AI, data, application development, modern work, and security. We span them all. So I'm very fortunate to lead our generative AI practice here. So we actually start with more like a design thinking approach, and then we go into how we actually help people do this at scale. Personally, I've been in the field of advanced analytics for over 20 years. I stood up data warehouses and data science divisions nationwide. Been partnering with Microsoft since about 2022, done a lot of demos with everybody, and really talking about how do we do generative AI and how do we do it at scale.
Awesome, that's great. And Sridhar, same to you. Give us a glimpse into your journey and how CitiusTech is making an impact through AI innovations.
Awesome. Good morning, Puneet. Good morning, Jimmy. Great to be here. My name is Sridhar Turaga. I'm a Senior Vice President at CitiusTech. I lead our data analytics practices. I also co-lead our generative AI task force, an agentic AI task force for the company. Citius is a healthcare-focused technology services innovation organization. We work with over 140 leaders in healthcare across payer, provider, academic medical centers, medical technology organizations, and life sciences organizations. Healthcare is not an easy space. Healthcare is known to be very cautious in adopting technology, but something's different this time. Healthcare is leading the charge on the adoption of generative AI and agentic AI, and we are playing an important role in enabling our customers on that. Me personally, I worked in a variety of startups and roles and technologies over years, but the one topic that I've been a student of all my life is why do some organizations get value for all the technology disruption and others don't. Everyone tries the same things, but some succeed, some don't. So even with our own customers, that's my focus, how to help them get value out of all the possibilities of AI. So great to be on this discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jimmy and Sridhar. What great introductions. So let's continue by diving into today's main focus, building and scaling an AI center of excellence. So we will unpack what defines a successful AI COE and how to make it real, turning strategy into tangible outcomes. So Sridhar, let's start with the big picture. We have seen automation COEs, data COEs, and even innovation hubs. So why do we need an AI center of excellence now? What makes it different? And what does it truly need to do to deliver a real impact?
Yeah, it's a very fair question to think about. I think organizations have had center of excellence task forces for various technologies, and usually it's attempted for anything that's new. Even AI, many organizations have had data science teams and AI center of excellence in the past. But I think that in the last 2 years, since I would say, explosion of foundation models, the definition of AI and the possibilities of AI have completely changed. While it is still AI, there are many new avatars of AI that now we can benefit from. There is a conversational version of AI. There is a version of AI that is, of course, the classic predictive models. There's an agentic version of AI, which is driving point or automation in a process. There is generative AI. There is generative AI powered assist solutions. So I would say suddenly the definition of AI has significantly exploded. The second part, I think, is that foundation models and AI post-foundation models also democratize and give a larger number of people in the organization the ability to utilize the technology to build AI-powered solutions. But on the flip side, there are also new challenges and complexities we are dealing with. So if you think of this technology as something that can really drive impact on a larger set of problems and can really reimagine a lot more processes and services in an organization, I think a more methodical and an organizational wide approach is needed rather than point algorithms. Many people in the past attempted point algorithms and point solutions for AI, attempted niche problems. But if you want to go mainstream quickly, you'll have to think about an organizational mechanism. There are many mechanisms. AI COE is one of them that I think attempts to get the organization to adopt AI at scale. And I think that's really the why behind it. So it all stems from the fact that post-foundation models, AI has expanded the reach possibilities for us. The accessibility has changed, but new risks have come. And I think it's for that reason COE is an important and an interesting mechanism for organizations.
Wonderful insights, Sridhar. Jimmy, building on what Sridhar said, from your perspective, what are some of the most exciting opportunities emerging from the dedicated AI Center of Excellence, especially for partners and customers?
No, it's a great question, and Sridhar actually brought up some really good points. I'd like to start talking about like the most exciting opportunity that I've seen is the evolution of the Center of Excellence. So I've been doing Centers of Excellence for 20 years now, and so what we used to do with them in the data space is you would get together some people, we would talk about some data ideas, and then what happens is it would go back to an architect or an engineer, they do something up, and then maybe in couple months you might see something. So it was really kind of a slow process, and it really wasn't as iterative as it could have been. So so we could kind of show some things, mock up some dashboards, etc. Now generative AI came in, and so now the first thing that I think is probably the most exciting is that we're looking at able to show things in real time. So I always talk about the first time that I ever showed something off was I was actually sitting in a room live action prototyping with somebody, showing them value there right on site. Are we able to achieve this goal? I'm able to show that right now to say, yes, we need to invest time and effort into this. I think that speed of the COE is so important now, so we can show that. Also, we don't have as much of a technical oversight as necessary as it was in the past. So COEs that I typically see more successful are typically the people who are in analytics or maybe like your occupational change management. So those analytical folks are able to sit there and not have to build out complex workflows. They're able to start with the large language model, and then they're able to start sending things off to those more agentic workflows, as we're all talking about nowadays. And then the final thing is I believe is the ability to share your information out from the COE back to the masses, because we saw a lot of issues where something died in the COE, where it maybe just ended right there. But now what I do is that whenever we're prototyping something, we're showing you, hey, here's the new latest and greatest. So one that I just worked on was how do we classify expenses into a certain general ledger. At the end of that prompt, I was like, type up the notes for this and let me go ahead and send that out to everybody. I don't have to have a scribe sitting there. I'm actually using generative AI itself to be that person that then tells the masses, here's what we did. And so now there's able to be more visibility into that COE.
Awesome. No, this is great. What a great foundation, of why Center of AI Excellence is, a strategic initiative and how is it different. So let's zoom into the what specifically, and let's define the scope and ensure focus. So thinking about execution, Jimmy, I'd love to hear your views on what truly makes an AI COE successful. Like what are some of the key factors that you have seen that elevated from theory to real impact?
I like to see a COE measured on 4 distinct areas. So when we're talking about like OKRs and things like that. So the first thing that is, we've just talked about prototyping, but how do we measure that? We talk about first about adoption and scaling. So when we talk about adoption and scaling, like, what's coming out of the COE and what's going to be measured, hey, we need to deploy 8 use cases. We need to have 70% customer satisfaction increase. We need to train X number of employees on AI. So that adoption and scaling coming out, that's a great way to measure the success of that. The next part, and this one is always fun, is we always have to talk about business value and ROI. That is something that's just imperative. So we're able to start talking about, like, hey, we increased X number of revenue. That was a hard cost, but we also have to measure kind of the soft costs behind that as well. So back to customer satisfaction, the number of calls that we've seen decrease come into our centers. Our time to market, how did we deplete that one? That's another way I like to see this measured. Those 2 I see a lot of, but the other 2 that I think of are a little bit different is the capabilities and governance. So everybody at home, your folks are using AI, whether you like it or you don't. So how are we, as that center of excellence, sharing that information? How are we helping ourselves to deploy training plans? So back to what the example I just gave you is, here's the notes from this. I want to build a training plan around this because we want people going into our Azure sandboxes to play rather than to go to their LLMs by themselves. So measuring that, like, hey, we've got a new framework. We have a 90% adherence to the framework from a capabilities perspective is important. But then the final thing, and this is very hard to measure, but I think it's one of the fun ones, is how are we innovating and what are we doing versus our competition? So how are we actually showing what our maturity score looks like? And how are we sending that out to our customers? How are we advertising that we're doing AI internally? And this is how we can help you. So for example, what we do here at Quisitive is we did time card automation. So that was a big lift for us. So that's something that we can go out to customers and say, we have noticed that, we've increased our revenue, we've decreased our time card issues, and this is how we're innovating. That's another thing is like to measure is how many of those messages are going out to your customers, because your customers are still trying to figure this out.
Awesome. Now, these are some great insights, Jimmy, that what makes that AI COE thrive, like absolutely amazing. So let's take a moment to look at the flip side. Sridhar, from what you have seen in the field, what are some traps or failure points in COEs that tend to derail progress, and how can organizations avoid them and keep driving impact?
Yeah, I love what Jimmy said. I'll just kind of add one thing and then I'll come back to your question. One of the reason I feel that the adoption, at least in healthcare space, of generative AI and agentic AI is so high, is that there is an intuitive feeling that this technology, foundation models, were built for healthcare problems. As you know, in healthcare, data is unstructured by design. You will see all the faxes still floating around. Doctors' notes. It is unstructured by nature. It's also a unique industry where the consumer experience is fragmented. No single player controls more than 20% of a consumer experience, a patient or a member. I think in such a fragmented environment, it almost seems like AI post foundation models was born to solve this problem. So the number of problems that we want to solve and the type of problems is much wider now. I think that kind of goes back to COE. So I'll take the liberty of rewording what COE stands for, because obviously everybody knows it's called Center of Excellence. I'm going to reframe it and say, what if we were to think of it as Circle of Execution and not Center of Excellence? And I think that also tells us why COEs fail and why COEs can succeed. The problem with having a Center of Excellence mindset is that you tend to have a few people super passionate talking and evangelizing the art of possible, wanting to make this get adopted, but everybody else is either not participating or feeling left out, or some version of, is this going to work? Whereas if you think of the responsibility of the COE as circle of execution, that our role in setting this up is to expand the circle of execution of AI in the organization, then you approach it very differently. And this is even more important after AI being built on foundation models, because foundation models have now unlocked ability for a much larger sense of stakeholders to build AI. So I would just, humbly reframe it as circle of execution if you both like it. Now, Jimmy likes it, so I'm good.
I'm going to steal it, so I love it. So
it's amazing. I was like, circle of execution, like, wow, love it actually. This is like,
So
what a powerful reflection, and like, what a great way to say it now.
And in some ways, I feel that, and this is what I always talk to customers as well. Now, let's look at the traps. The first trap is to see it as a small group of people who are the experts. That goes against the possibility of AI now, because we want every process to be automated, every product to be reimagined, every service. That possibility exists today. Secondly, if you really want widespread adoption, you need to equip all kinds of stakeholders to think AI first. In our business, we are training nurses to think about how to use AI in accessing clinical guidelines. We're teaching physicians and physician researchers to define an AI first patient experience and really kind of drive adoption of, for example, ambient listening, where it's kind of now auto scribing the conversation. Without them, that is not possible. So I think the circle of execution is also about non-technical users starting to really drive and pull AI than a group of people, being the messengers and pushing. The other trap I think to avoid is death by proof of concept. I think proof of concepts are easy; they become easier, so it's easy to fall in that trap. But we kind of get stuck in that valley forever. So I love what Jimmy said, which is kind of defining the ROI, defining the measures of success as how many went to deployment, as he said, is a very important measure of success, because if you go by the number of ideas and proof of concepts, you can get stuck in that cycle forever. So balancing between starting and completing, I think, is a very, very important trap to avoid. I think the other trap, which is the thinking that it's too easy, on the flip side. I also see a lot of people thinking just because they are able to make a couple of calls to an LLM, or just kind of got a chatbot stood up, that's all it takes. But there are a lot more controls required, a lot of validation required. There's cost associated with it. I think those aspects are not thought. It looks very simple. Everybody gets the first three steps right and then get stuck. So how to think like scale is very, very important. Last thing I would say is, I think it's also important to think about the organizational mindset. I think not everywhere we can attempt to automate existing processes and platforms, because the amount of change required is so high. So I always suggest to customers that, why don't you think about assist before automation? And assist is an easy way to begin. Build assists, show the power of this technology before we go to automation. So I think that organizational muscle is super important. It goes without saying, security, compliance, controls, trust are super important. In healthcare, for example, if you cannot demonstrate quality and trust, nobody will adopt technology, because at the end of the day, the relationship between the physician and the patient is sacred, and nothing can compromise that. So I think these are some traps I would think about.
No, these are like fantastic insights actually. And I just like, I'm in the healthcare space too. So, all your insights and use cases you're talking about, like really like totally with you on those ones. So and you've already touched a little bit on that, on the risk and responsible AI part of like healthcare space. So little bit, let's build on that, on the how actually, the mechanics of operating an AI, I'm going to say circle of execution now, especially around governance, risk, and responsible AI. So Sridhar, building on what you are saying, one of the biggest tensions we hear in AI initiative is balancing innovation with governance, and you see that a lot in the healthcare space too. So as a leader, how do you secure buy-in for governance without stalling innovation? Like, what has worked for you? Like, if you can a little bit talk more about
Yeah,
it in that
yeah.
area.
I think a couple of things seem to work. First and foremost, I would say focus less on proof of concept and focus more on proof of value. I think the technology works. I don't think we should invest our energies figuring out whether the technology works. As our CEO always says, don't show me that generative generates. It is meant to generate. So, but but what is the value equation of what we are attempting here? Will this scale? Do we have the data for this? Is it going to generate the outcome we are looking for? Is it meeting the bar of reliability that we require in the process? So I think that initial phase should focus less on the technology and more on scaling and value equation. And I think a lot of us who are excited about technology tend to kind of give less attention to that. I think that's important. I think the second part of it is what is measure of success, and that's where I think COE, a center of excellence, can do a great job, because what are the mechanics and language to measure success is important. I think accuracy is important. Everybody assumes accuracy, but humans are not accurate either always. But what are other measures of success? Scalability, fungibility, flexibility, speed. There are many other dimensions on which these solutions can succeed. So establish patient experience, member experience impact, care team experience. Doctors are burnt out by all the documentation they need to do. Can you reduce the burnout? So I would say arriving at an organizational mechanism of measure of success is important. The last thing I would say is um, there is I think a delicate balance between, let's be very centralized where everybody depends on this team. Doesn't work. At the same time, let everybody become independent and do whatever they want. That doesn't work either, because we will lose control of cost, quality, consistency, and actually will have a backlash. I think an interdependent model between the experts and the owners of the ultimate process, where they're dependent on each other and there's a good dance between the two of them, that's probably the model that works the best. So I think each organization has to arrive at its own balance on that. But I think these are some ways in which I would think about it.
Got it. No, these are great points. And Jimmy, building on, Sridhar's perspective, let's talk a little bit more about, the trust, risk, and responsible AI, because they come up in every Gen AI conversation, which I have seen. So in your experience, are we putting enough emphasis on guardrails, or are we still playing catch up?
We're still playing catch up. I'll be honest with you on this one. So there's three areas that I really want to focus on that we need to start thinking about as staying ahead of the curve instead of catching up. So the first one that I think is really important is bias prevention. So the way that you speak to a model, and I want to focus on generative AI for just a second, the way that you speak to a model or the way you frame a question is going to dictate the response. If everybody saw, there was an article the other day where they said, please stop saying please to the model. And they asked about that. Well, it's interesting. I did some research on that. Just that word please changed the whole conversation behind it. It wanted to be more friendly. It wanted to be more accommodating. So the reason I say that is that injected bias into it. It said that I've got that one word made me say this needs to sound in a completely different tone than what I needed to look at. So when we're talking about bias, so that's an easy one, but what I like to do inside of the application layers is like build something in there that when the user puts their prompt in there, have it go through a couple of steps. Use the large language model for what it's good for. Is there bias in there? How do I frame the question? Am I getting the right answer out of this? Have it rebuild the response, send it back to the user and say, is this really what you were thinking? And then they will go ahead and send that through, and then that will trigger the response that they need. It is a little bit extra cost, but when we're talking about these tokens, we're still probably talking about decimal dust at that point. But I would rather take that extra step and make sure that I'm using the right framework to eliminate bias rather than having somebody make decisions on bias data. So that's the first thing that I think is really important with bias. The second is transparency. I think that is so incredibly important. So that workflow that I just told you is, hey, I'm going to take your words and I'm going to manipulate them. Let's be honest. That's what I just said I was going to do. But having the model come out and tell you, this is how I'm going to do this work, how those workflows are out there. At the end of every time I build an application, I actually have it build out the process flow for me. There's this great thing called mermaid code where I can say, hey, put this in a process flow for me. Let me dump it into mermaid code and I copy and paste it. Boom, I got a process diagram. So whenever we're building those applications, think about this as your data dictionary for your AI application. And the best part about that is we can keep those in fairly real time, because if any of us, we've all been in data for a while, your data dictionary is about as good as yesterday if we're lucky. I mean, so it's always kind of catching up. This way we can actually streamline it, show everybody how we're doing things. Like are we tacking in models? Are we actually sending something outside of a model to like a more of an ML model? Where generative AI is directionally accurate, but sometimes I need that 99.999% accuracy. So how am I sending those workflows across? So transparency, I think, is something that's very important in this process. And then finally, I think we've all hit it. Data privacy, I think, is something that you absolutely have to take first and foremost. Folks, I cannot tell you how many times I go to a customer and somebody has said somebody in our organization has used their favorite LLM. They don't understand they didn't turn off the thing that said help improve the model for everybody. So my data has now leaked out to the ether. That is something that is huge because it's so easy right now. You can go to any large language model, pop in an Excel spreadsheet, and start asking questions. If you don't have that enterprise grade sandbox and then infrastructure to give people the spot where they can experiment, they are going to go wherever they can to get their experimenting out. And the problem is we've got these handy little doodads here that are really easy to just jump on your phone and start sending something across. So there's a lot of workarounds now. So that privacy is important because we can set up the infrastructure and then make sure, so for example, using Azure cannot train on your data, so that way they have that experience of using several different LLMs, getting the right information, but then we still have all of that security behind the scenes to where we're like, it's okay, I can talk to that spreadsheet. So those are the three areas that I think that we have to stay ahead of the curve, but honestly, I'm seeing us more catching up to that.
Absolutely
Puneet,
amazing.
if I can
Totally
add
love
to,
the
if I
insight.
can
Yeah,
add to,
please
I
do.
love how Jimmy put those three buckets. One thing that has helped is also try and establish measurable metrics in the organization around quality and trust. For example, everybody throws hallucination around as a fear, but what is hallucination and can you measure it? Everybody wants to avoid bias, but you have measures for bias. Jimmy talked about robustness, right? Like you need to be robust. It gives a different answer every time depending on how you ask. But do you know how to test for it? Do you know how to measure it? So one of the things that we push for is to go beyond this anecdotal measurement of quality and trust and get into metrics driven approach. Then you give an opportunity to first of all baseline yourself, improve, but most importantly demonstrate to stakeholders that if there is a risk being taken here, the risk is measurable and acceptable. Otherwise we are in this world of anecdotal assessments, and that's the other reason why we get stuck in proof of concepts, because how do we even know that it's consistent? So that's the other thing I would just add to that.
No, and I think that measurability is so important, but also the one thing that I do see is back to, are we behind the scenes? That human in the loop has to be there, and that's we want to automate the human out so badly. So Sridhar, in your area, you don't want to automate out a physician. You've got to keep that person in there. So back to your saying, there's got to be that measurability inside of there, but there also has to be the person who is overseeing that explanation. Honestly, when I'm building things up, I will say, give me 2 or 3 permutations of this answer, because these people are highly trained in this area. So let this be that assistant, back to what we were talking about earlier, where now I'm making tweaks, but I'm still putting my brain power into that instead of us really hurrying to get rid of the architect, get rid of the lawyer, get rid of the doctor. That's not the point behind this. It's to make them more efficient. But how do I have the metrics that I can look at first and then see, yeah, now I'm ready to go ahead and take this into production or make that changes. So I like the idea of having that human in the loop and the metric driven expansion.
Yeah, I totally agree, particularly in healthcare, because it's so regulated and it's so compliance driven. I don't think that the technology can ever replace a physician or a nurse or a care team member or a care manager. I think they can augment and assist and eliminate wasteful activities, but I don't think that autonomy is either welcome or feasible.
I agree with that, and that for our people at home here, listen to those words. We're not trying to automate those people out. We're trying to make them more efficient. Because I do see, whenever I go to a company, they're like, how do I get it to work at the PhD level? I'm like, well, let's take it back and go maybe to the low master's level. That's where we can really start helping out. Those people are highly trained for a reason. So.
Great insights, both of you. This is absolutely great. So now we've talked about, how to build and govern an AI COE. So let's talk something which every organization wrestles with. And I know, Sridhar, you touched on it a little bit earlier. I want to talk about the scale now, because, what often happens is that everyone is, having that innovations are emerging from the COEs, but they never leave it. You a little bit talked about that. So Jimmy, you must have seen that quite a bit. So from Jimmy, your perspective, like great use cases are born inside COE, but sometimes they're just stuck right there. Why do you think that happens? And what can we do differently to ensure that those are not just some great demos, that they become scaled solutions that deliver enterprise value?
So I think it's a great question on that one because let's start with the COE has the most amazing ability right now to build out those proof of concepts to show like even the proof of value. I remember my first one ever that I did was I was showing generative AI to a construction company, and the gent said, "I'm never going to use AI." Said, "What do you do?" He's like, "I build skyscrapers." Said, "Okay, well, what does it need to build a skyscraper?" He's like, "Well, I got to figure out the cost for the materials. I got to figure out the labor laws. I got to figure out what are some like skyscrapers." So in 30 minutes, I just built prompts out that says, "Hey, to build this type of skyscraper, what materials do you need? Like, what's the zoning laws? I live in Orlando, Florida. What are the zoning laws in Orlando, Florida? Oh, by the way, who is the person in Orlando that I need to go talk to get my permits?" So he leaned back and he goes, "Yes, I got to use AI now." That happens very frequently. So we're able to get to those pain points a lot faster and show value. The problem is to answer your question, is we don't have that next layer of sponsorship to actually take that up. So I find that COEs live and die by their senior level sponsorship. If the COE is acting autonomously, and they're not giving anything back to the leadership to say, this is why we need to invest. Here's the ROI behind it. Here's how many hours we're going to be saving with this particular workload. It dies. One of the things that here at Quisitive is my CEO is actually challenging all of us to write their own agent, come up with their own piece of it. So he's actually taking a top-down approach. But what we've got to do is we've got to make sure we've got that sponsor who says, this is worth our time and our treasure in order to make us more efficient. Now, on that note, we have to document for them. We have to be able to show those ROIs. We have to be able to show them that proof of value, show them why we need to do this. Because one of the things I see failing often is people are taking generative AI use cases and it's like, well, it's saving this one person 4 hours a month. Is that really worth our time? It's worth it to the one person, don't get me wrong. But how do you build out your enterprise level architecture to where now instead of me saving one person 4 hours, now I'm saving an entire department 400,000 hours? And those are very, very useful. So it goes back to after you have your COE, having your executive showcase. Hey, this is what we came up with. We have 30 minutes of your time. This is what the ROI looks like. Do we have your permission to go forward? And that is where I can see the adoption really start to take shape because now you got that buy-in.
I think sponsorship is the key. I totally agree on this one. And Sridhar, if you have anything other pointers to add on this one.
Yeah, one of the nice things about the Azure stack is that it actually, about even 2 years ago, we were assembling many pieces, to lay the foundation. But today, you can literally out of the box start with an AI platform that is also an agentic AI platform, that is also a generative AI platform, with a very holistic solution for your vector DB, for your smart search, for your foundation model, also connecting to the existing application and data infrastructure. So that comes out of the box. So one of the things that organizations should seriously think about is that, can I first build on what comes out of the box? I can tune it for my needs, but avoid the temptation to assemble pieces of the puzzle, because it's a fast moving space. There's always some cool feature out there of one piece of the puzzle. The minute you bring that in, then you have this cacophony of technology. So I would say staying disciplined on a core central stack, and a core native stack, I think goes a long way. It avoids lots of problems down the line. I think that's important to have the discipline to do that, and then add things that you feel really, really are differentiated in your organization. I think that is very different now, and I think that should be taken advantage of. I think the second thing I would also call out is, everybody focuses on use cases and solutions. Those are important, but there are also some reusable elements that we should focus on. For example, in our world of healthcare, we all want to solve the prior auth problem. We all want to solve the care management problem. We will solve it one day. But there is a piece of the puzzle which is a clinical summary. There's a piece of the puzzle which is clinical guideline interpretation. You don't solve that Lego block or that service or that agent, you're never going to solve the prior auth problem. So that's where COE becomes very important, because a COE can attempt to solve some of the abstract reusable agents and blocks. So I would say operating at a foundation layer is important. Operating at the use case layer is important, but it's the middle layer of reusable playbooks, reusable components, I think goes a long way. And I think that's a little bit more abstract than taking a particular use case. But the benefit on the flip side you see is, if you've codified your clinical guidelines, then you can solve 10 other problems more consistently. So I would say that's the other layer that is often ignored, which is reusable components, playbooks.
And I agree with that 100%, especially in the world of agentics right now. Like, why have 12 different versions of your web crawling agent. You just don't need it, so why? So, and that's what we have people getting stuck with, because I'm a data scientist by trade. We like to play, but we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel every single time. So and that's what we coach here also, is how do we have that reusable framework? Is, here's the agent that does X, Y, and Z. Here's your web scraper. Here's your formatter. Here's what exports to PDF. Here's what updates a record in your CRM. All of that just needs to be put on the spot. And then one of the things that you said that I thought was great was the measurability behind it, because you said, hey, everybody's trying to eat the elephant, for lack of a better term, all at once. But have that, if we even save 20% of this problem right now, how much time did we save in the long run? So, and people are looking at, well, I have to automate the whole thing or it's not a success. We've actually found a lot with the incremental gains behind it. Is, we're automating out the bottom 20, the bottom 40, and then that's where that expert has to kick in anyway. So that's where, once we change that mind shift to be, let's think about incremental gains instead of we have to complete this all at once, that's what I've seen as being a big win.
Love that. Sponsorship, reusable framework, incremental stuff, and low-hanging fruit, I guess, looking at that bottom layer, looking at the clinical summarization and things like that, especially talking from the healthcare side, rather than just looking at that big element, just start with that. Excellent insights from both of you. I truly appreciate your perspectives that you've shared so far. Jason is bringing a wealth of experience supporting our partners on their AI COE journey. So, Jason, we'd love to hear your perspective or the key takeaways that resonated with you.
Well, there was so many. I don't think we have enough time to cover them all, but I really did love that circle execution. I'm going to definitely be using that in the future. That was fantastic. But the one thing I wanted to maybe just reinforce is the success of an AI COE is really about repeatability. It's great that you can create one use case. And, me being a data scientist and remembering the old days of data warehousing, I only had to do it be right once. And then from there, if I built the data warehouse, 9 times out of 10, everything else came with it. In the area of AI, we really don't have one killer app. We're going to have many, and thus repeatability is really important. So for us to be able to repeat that, we need to be able to scale and have more than one use case and be very agile, adaptable. I think this is really the big one, is when we're talking about having a common framework. As a data scientist, a lot of things work on my computer, but am I going to be able to get that to work in production is a whole different story. And so being able to follow repeatable patterns, to be able to learn from others, and more importantly, to go out there and start to understand how you can do experimentation on your data so that you can get the outcomes that you're looking for important. A lot of people don't know how to really, say, define their problem, make that problem measurable, and then experiment on that. And that's going to be a really important piece. So you're not building these models based on educated guesses, but on evidence. And that's going to be one of the real critical factors going forward. So to me, I think that's going to be important when it comes to having a successful COE. So I guess I will wrap things up. As we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts for an organizations at different stages of their AI COE journey, whether just starting out or looking to scale. What's one practical step they can take today to get started or accelerate their progress? Sridhar, do you want to go first and answer that question?
Yeah, I would say don't make roadmaps, get on a road trip, because you don't have an intuition for this. This is different. So don't make roadmaps for a journey you've never been on. Get on a road trip, and then kind of it'll start to make sense.
I like that
And
one too.
what's your
I'm gonna
thoughts,
steal it.
Jimmy?
So, I want you to rethink data. Because everybody I go to right now, so if you think about us in the old data warehouse days, we had to have all of the data. It had to be stored. It had to be modeled. Everything had to be done. We have got an amazing opportunity to reset how we think about data. Generative AI is not a big data solution. It's actually a small data solution. So it's like so when you're thinking, I've got to have everything modeled correctly. No, you don't. Start with the report that runs your business every single day. How do you build that expert around that data set? That is where you can execute, because I see a lot of people mostly hung up on the data side because they're like, well, my data estate is just shot. I've got to start there. No, start small data set. The build versus buy is enormous right now. Build on top of that data set, and then away you go. You've already got it done. And then start your data monetization as you go. But really rethink data, because again, we've got a great reset right now.
And one
Amazing.
of the final
And, I have the database background, and so this is music to my ears, and I totally see it. Like without data, what is AI going to do? So absolutely love that. Jason, were you going to say something? Do you want to add something?
And one of the final thoughts I would just conclude with is I think people are making this more complicated than it really needs to be. Everybody thinks, like in the old days, that everybody needs to be an engineer to get started. I think our audience that we're targeting for our COE are our business departments. What we want to do is bring automation into those departments through agentic workloads or through different chatbots. So this isn't really a hard thing to get started. It's just making sure you have the right ingredients to get started.
And I'm already ready to take the road trip, Sridhar. So thank you, Jimmy and Sridhar, for such rich and engaging conversation. And thank you, Jason, for your reflections. So for the audience, if you are a customer and thinking of building an AI COE, Jimmy and Sridhar are your go-to contacts. And for the partners interested in turning this into an offer, please feel free to reach out to Jason and I. And thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.